Welcome to the deep dive where we're tackling a corner of the Warhammer 40k universe.
A corner?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's huge, but it's both fascinating and terrifying. The Eye of Terror. You've given us some really interesting sources on this region of space.
Yeah, quite a few.
And I'm ready to get lost in the weirdness of it all.
Lost is a good word for it. The Eye of Terror is, well, it's notorious for distorting reality.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not just some sci-fi trope. It's a place where the laws of physics and even time, well, they get warped.
Literally.
Literally. It's like the universe's version of a funhouse mirror, but instead of distorted reflections, you've got demons and nightmares.
And we're not just talking about a small anomaly here, right? Some of these descriptions mention a size of over 10,000 light years across.
Yeah, at least, probably more.
That's bigger than some entire galaxies?
It is. It's massive. This swirling mass of energy.
Yeah.
Located on the edge of the galaxy. And it's thought to have formed from the psychic shockwave of an entire civilization's fall.
Whoa.
Just imagine the psychic energy of billions of beings collapsing in on itself.
Oh, wow.
It's a wound in reality that never healed.
So it's not just a place, it's almost like a scar on the universe, a constant reminder of some ancient cataclysmic event.
Exactly, and that scar is constantly oozing with, well, the stuff of nightmares.
It's where, it's where the warp, a parallel dimension of pure psychic energy, bleeds into the material universe.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, let's talk about the warp, because it feels like that's the key to understanding what makes the Eye of Terror tick.
It is.
From what I've gathered, it's not just some empty void. It's teeming with psychic energy, fueled by the thoughts and emotions of every living being in the galaxy.
That's one way to put it. It's like this roiling ocean of psychic energy.
Yeah.
And every sentient being is contributing to its currents.
With everything.
Yeah. With every thought, every feeling, every dream.
And the Eye of Terror is where those currents become the most turbulent and dangerous.
Precisely. It's where the barrier between the warp and the material universe is weakest, making it easier for warp entities to cross over. And for the laws of reality to break down.
So a trip into the Eye of Terror is not for the faint of heart. Right. Or for anyone who wants to come back with their sanity intact.
Right. Even navigators, the mutants who use psychic powers to guide ships through the warp, well, they give the Eye a wide berth. One wrong turn in there, and
what?
And you could end up drifting through time and space for millennia.
Or worse.
Yeah, or worse.
I've read accounts of chaos fleets emerging from the Eye, completely out of sync with the current timeline. Like they were frozen in time for centuries and then suddenly spat back into the galaxy.
Happens all the time.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons the Eye is so feared. Its unpredictability makes it a strategic nightmare for anyone trying to, well, defend against it.
Right.
Imagine fighting an enemy that could appear anywhere at any time with no warning.
It's like trying to fight a ghost.
Exactly. You never know when or where it's going to strike.
And that's not even taking into account the
what?
The denizens of the Eye?
Right.
The demons, the Chaos Space Marines, the countless twisted creatures that call that place home.
Countless.
Speaking of demons, I have to ask.
Sure.
If the Eye is so saturated with warp energy, wouldn't that make it a paradise for them? I mean, it's their element, right?
It is. In a sense, the Eye of Terror is a demonic ecosystem. It's where they can, well, manifest their full power. And where the strongest among them, the demon princes, carve out their own realms.
So it's not just a chaotic free-for-all. There's like a hierarchy, a structure to this madness.
There is. Though it's, well, a constantly shifting and treacherous one. Demon princes are constantly vying for power, scheming against each other, and launching wars that can span centuries.
Wow.
It's a chaotic reflection of the warp itself.
And what about the mortals who end up in the Eye? I've read that there are entire human populations trapped there. How do they survive in such a hostile environment?
Survival is a relative term within the Eye. For many, it's a life of, well, servitude to the chaos powers.
Like?
They might be forced to fight in demonic armies, toil in nightmarish factories, or simply be tortured for the amusement of their demonic overlords.
It's a bleak existence, but some of these sources mention humans rising to become champions of chaos.
Oh, yeah.
Blessed with power and prolonged lifespans. It seems like even in the depths of the Eye, there's still a perverse kind of ambition.
There is. The pursuit of power is, well, it's a universal constant, even in the face of unimaginable horror. And chaos offers a path to power. even if it's a path paved with suffering and corruption.
And some of these Chaos Champions even manage to gather their own followers.
Oh, yeah.
Forming like bands of renegades who raid and plunder the galaxy. It seems like the Eye of Terror is as much a launching pad for attacks as it is a prison.
It is. The Eye is constantly spewing forth warbands of Chaos Space Marines, demonic incursions, and fleets of renegade ships, all seeking to spread their influence and, well, wreak havoc on the galaxy.
You mentioned Chaos Space Marines.
Right.
They're the fallen Space Marines, corrupted by chaos.
Exactly. They were once the loyal warriors of the Imperium, but, well, they turned against their oaths and embraced the power of chaos.
So they're like really bad news.
They're a formidable force,
Yeah.
driven by a hatred for their former brothers and a thirst for power.
And they often ally with these renegade bands.
They do. Sometimes out of necessity, sometimes out of shared ambition. The Iron Warriors, for example, are a Chaos Space Marine Legion known for their pragmatism and their willingness to ally with virtually any renegade force, regardless of their specific Chaos allegiance.
So even within the chaos of the Eye of Terror, there are alliances of convenience.
There are.
It's a complex web of rivalries and betrayals where the only constant is the pursuit of power.
That's a very accurate assessment. The Eye of Terror is a microcosm of the Warhammer 40k universe itself, a place where the forces of order and chaos are locked in an eternal struggle.
This has been an incredible overview of the Eye of Terror so far. We've learned about its origins, its connection to the warp, and the various factions that call it home. But what I'm really curious about is how it's even possible to travel to and through this place. I mean, if time and space are so fluid in the warp, how do you navigate a region where reality itself is constantly shifting?
That's a question that has plagued, well, even the most experienced warp travelers. The Eye of Terror exists in both real space and the warp, making it accessible through either dimension. But both methods are fraught with danger.
So you could theoretically travel to the Eye of Terror in a spaceship, or by navigating the warp.
You could. But even with the most skilled navigator guiding your ship, there's no guarantee of a safe passage. The gravitational anomalies of the Eye can pull ships off course, and the unpredictable currents of the warp can fling them through time and space with, well, no warning.
And then there's the risk of encountering
Hostile chaos patrols.
Or worse.
Exactly. Traveling to the Eye of Terror is a gamble, even for those who know its secrets.
We've talked about how chaos fleets can emerge from the Eye at random points in time, but are there any recorded instances of someone intentionally traveling into the Eye and then back out again?
There are, but such journeys are shrouded in secrecy and often end in tragedy. The accounts that do exist, they speak of unimaginable horrors.
Like?
Landscapes that shift and change before your eyes, and temporal distortions that can age a man a century in the blink of an eye.
It sounds like a journey into the heart of madness.
It is a testament to the power of the warp
Yeah.
and the enduring threat it poses to the material universe. It's amazing, really, how much the Eye of Terror reveals about the warp itself.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a physical location.
Right.
It's like holding a magnifying glass up to this other dimension, this immaterium. We get to see its raw power on full display.
It's true. We've been kind of dancing around the edges of what the warp actually is, but maybe it's time to dive a bit deeper. Some of the sources you gave me describe it as a realm of pure psychic energy.
Right.
Where thoughts can literally shape reality.
Yeah.
Is that really how it works?
It is, though. It's far more complex and chaotic than just wishing things into existence.
I can imagine.
Imagine all the emotions, dreams, hopes, and fears of every sentient being in the galaxy just swirling together.
Oh.
That's the warp. It's raw, untamed psychic energy, constantly shifting and reacting.
So it's not just this empty space. It's more like a sea of dot consciousness.
Yeah, that's...
And humanity, with all our anxieties and ambitions, is just churning it up even more.
A sea of consciousness is a poetic way to put it. But remember, it's not just conscious thought. Every base instinct, every fleeting feeling, every nightmare contributes to the warp. It's why psykers are so dangerous. They can tap into that raw power, but also why they can be so easily overwhelmed by it.
That makes sense. It explains why the Imperium is so wary of psychic powers, even while they rely on them for things like navigators.
Yeah.
It's like playing with fire.
Exactly. The warp is a force of nature, and like any force of nature, well, it can be both beautiful and terrifying. It's what allows for faster-than-light travel.
Right.
But it's also home to entities that feed on fear and despair.
You're talking about those warp predators, right? Some of what I've read makes them sound like psychic vampires.
Oh, yeah.
Preying on the weak-minded.
That's one way to think about them. They're drawn to strong emotions, particularly negative ones.
But it's not always a straightforward attack.
No.
Sometimes.
Sometimes they can subtly influence a person's thoughts and actions.
Oh, wow.
Driving them to madness without them even realizing it.
So it's not just about being physically strong, it's about mental fortitude, too.
It is.
That must be a constant pressure, knowing that something could be whispering in your ear from another dimension.
It is. It's why the Imperium emphasizes order and obedience.
Really?
Even to the point of ruthlessness. They believe that any deviation from the Emperor's light can open a crack for the warp to seep in.
Which brings us back to the Eye of Terror.
Right.
It's like that crack has become a gaping wound, allowing all those warp entities like demons to spill into the material universe.
Precisely. And demons are even more dangerous than those warp predators. They're manifestations of the chaos gods.
Oh.
Embodiments of the darkest aspects of the warp. Where a warp predator might drive you mad, a demon can possess your very soul.
That raises an interesting question. We know that the Eye of Terror is where these chaos incursions are most likely to happen. But are there other ways for demons to enter the material universe? Can it happen anywhere? Or are there specific conditions they need?
That's a question that has fascinated Imperial scholars for millennia. While the Eye of Terror is the most obvious point of entry, it's not the only one.
Oh.
Places of strong psychic resonance.
Like
areas where the veil between the warp and reality is thin can become focal points for demonic incursions.
So, battlefields where emotions run high.
Yeah.
Or places of great suffering.
Exactly. Or even places where powerful rituals are performed.
Either intentionally
or
unintentionally.
Both. Remember, the warp is fueled by emotions and belief.
Right.
The more intense the emotion, the more it echoes in the immaterium. And the more likely it is to attract the attention of something unwanted.
So the Imperium's obsession with order and control isn't just paranoia.
No.
It's a survival strategy. They're trying to minimize those ripples in the warp.
In a way, yes. Though their methods are often extreme.
Even by the standards of the 41st millennium.
Right.
It makes you wonder, though. If the warp is so influenced by emotions, is there a flip side to that? Can positive emotions like hope or courage have an effect as well?
That's a question that has been debated for centuries. Some believe that positive emotions can create a kind of counterforce to chaos, a beacon of light in the darkness. Others argue that all emotions, even positive ones, simply add to the turbulence of the warp, making it even more unpredictable.
It's a chilling thought that even our best intentions could unintentionally fuel the very thing we're trying to fight against.
It's a grim reality of the Warhammer 40k universe. The warp is not a force to be trifled with. It's a reflection of our collective soul. And as long as there's darkness within us, there will always be a danger of it spilling out into the material world.
But you mentioned beacons of light. Are there any examples of that? Of hope pushing back against the darkness?
There are stories, legends whispered among those who fight against chaos. Tales of individuals whose faith or courage shone so brightly that they repelled demonic incursions.
Or even banished powerful entities back to the warp.
Yeah.
So even in the grimmest of universes, there's still a glimmer of hope.
There is. Whether it's faith in the Emperor, belief in a cause, or simply the will to survive, those flickers of hope can make all the difference in the face of overwhelming darkness. They represent the potential for good within the warp, a potential that is constantly being tested, but never extinguished.
That's an encouraging thought, though it doesn't make the reality of the warp any less terrifying.
No, it doesn't. But it's important to remember that even in the Warhammer 40k universe, there is more to existence than just endless war and suffering. There are moments of heroism, of sacrifice, of compassion. And those moments, however fleeting, are what make the fight worthwhile.
You mentioned that the warp allows for faster-than-light travel. We know that navigators use their psychic abilities to guide ships through the Immaterium, but are there other ways to harness the warp's power?
There are, though most are considered dangerous and heretical by the Imperium. Some psykers can teleport themselves or others across vast distances, manipulate objects with their minds, or even see glimpses of the future.
So the warp isn't just about spaceships and demonic invasions. It has a more subtle side as well.
Exactly. It's a source of immense power, and that power can manifest in many ways. Some factions, like the Eldar, have developed sophisticated techniques for channeling the warp, using it for everything from healing to warfare.
But the Eldar also serve as a warning, don't they?
They do.
Their reliance on the warp ultimately led to their downfall, creating Slaanesh, the chaos god of pleasure and excess.
Their history is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked psychic power. It shows that even the most advanced civilizations can be corrupted by the warp if they're not careful.
It seems like every species in the Warhammer 40k universe has to find its own way to navigate the warp, balancing its potential with its inherent dangers.
That's true. The warp is a universal constant, but how each species interacts with it is a reflection of their own unique nature and beliefs.
Speaking of different species, how do the orcs, with their savage nature and seemingly simplistic minds, interact with the warp?
The orcs are a fascinating case. Their psychic powers are very different from those of humans or Eldar.
How so?
They're driven by a collective belief system, a gestalt consciousness that allows them to manifest their desires into reality.
So it's like if enough orcs believe in something strongly enough, it actually becomes true?
In a way, yes. If enough orcs believe their guns are powerful, their crude weapons become surprisingly effective. If enough orcs believe they can win a battle, their sheer ferocity can overwhelm even the most disciplined enemy.
It sounds like the orcs are living embodiments of the power of belief, but a very raw and untamed version of it.
Exactly. Their psychic energy is chaotic and unpredictable, just like them, which makes them both incredibly dangerous and incredibly difficult to predict.
This discussion about the orcs and the warp makes me think about how the Eye of Terror is this breeding ground for chaos invasions.
It is.
We've touched on how demonic incursions work, but what does a full-scale invasion from the Eye of Terror actually look like?
Imagine a tidal wave of darkness just crashing against the shores of reality. Warp rifts tear open, spewing forth legions of demons, chaos space marines, and corrupted mortals. Planets are consumed by warp storms, their populations enslaved or mutated into monstrous forms. It's a vision of hell unleashed upon the galaxy.
And these invasions are coordinated by someone.
Sometimes.
Demon Prince, perhaps?
Sometimes, yes. A powerful demon prince might rally his forces for a specific objective, like conquering a strategic world or spreading a particular plague. But often these invasions are more like a chaotic outpouring of the warp's rage, driven by surges of psychic energy rather than any grand strategy.
So it's not just about military might, it's about the sheer, overwhelming force of the warp itself.
Exactly. It's like trying to hold back a tsunami with a sandcastle.
Whoa.
The Imperium can muster all the firepower it can, but against the full might of the warp, even their most formidable weapons can seem insignificant.
It paints a pretty bleak picture for the Imperium, constantly fighting against an enemy that can strike from anywhere at any time with a force that defies logic and reason.
It does. The Imperium's existence is one of constant struggle, a desperate battle for survival against an enemy that is both within and without.
This exploration of the warp has been incredibly insightful.
It is.
If somewhat terrifying, it's made me realize just how much more there is to the Warhammer 40k universe than just epic battles and space marines.
The warp is the heart of it all, the source of both the universe's greatest wonders and its most profound horrors.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from the nature of the warp itself to its impact on different species. We've seen how it can be both a source of immense power and a conduit for unimaginable evil.
Indeed. It's a realm that defies easy categorization.
Really?
A place where the lines between reality and nightmare blur, and where the fate of the galaxy hangs in the balance.
This has been a fascinating and at times overwhelming deep dive into the warp. We've seen how it shapes the reality of the Warhammer 40k universe, but maybe it's time to bring it back down to a more personal level.
Okay.
How do everyday people in this grim, dark future deal with the ever-present threat of the warp? How does it affect their daily lives, their beliefs, their culture?
That's an excellent question, and one that deserves its own exploration.
Yeah.
The warp is not some abstract concept to the citizens of the Imperium. It's a very real and ever-present threat, a source of both fear and wonder.
And it shapes their beliefs, their rituals, their very understanding of the universe.
It does.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about demons and warp predators and the horrors of chaos.
Right, yeah.
But what about the average person living in the Imperium? How do they deal with the fact that there's this other dimension filled with
nightmares?
Yeah, nightmares, constantly like pressing against their reality.
It's not something they can easily ignore. The warp permeates, it really permeates every aspect of their lives. It shapes their beliefs, their culture, their very understanding of the universe.
So it's not just a military threat.
Yeah.
It's a psychological and spiritual one as well.
Absolutely. Just imagine living in a world where any stray thought or emotion could attract the attention of something, malevolent.
Yeah.
From another dimension, where even the most devout can be corrupted by unseen forces. It creates a pervasive sense of fear and uncertainty.
That explains why the Imperium is so obsessed with order and control.
It does.
They're trying to create a sense of stability in a universe that's inherently chaotic.
Precisely. The Emperor of Mankind is, he's worshipped as a god.
Really?
A beacon of light in the darkness of the warp. His image is everywhere. His words are law. And his psychic might is believed to shield the Imperium from the worst excesses of the warp.
So it's not just a personality cult.
No.
It's a coping mechanism, a way to create a sense of security in a universe that's inherently terrifying.
Exactly. It's about channeling those feelings of fear and anxiety into something constructive.
Right.
Into obedience, into unwavering loyalty to the Emperor.
But faith alone isn't enough to hold back the tide of chaos. That's where the
Inquisition.
Right, the Inquisition comes in.
The Inquisition is the Imperium's first and last line of defense against the insidious influence of chaos. They're the ones tasked with rooting out heresy and corruption.
So they
identifying and eliminating any threats to the Emperor's rule.
From what I've read, their methods are often
brutal.
Yeah. Brutal and unforgiving.
They are.
They don't hesitate to use torture, execution, or even planetary extermination to achieve their goals.
The Inquisition operates on the principle that any compromise, any tolerance of heresy, is a weakness that chaos can exploit.
So
they believe that the only way to combat an enemy as insidious and pervasive as chaos is through absolute ruthlessness.
It's a chilling thought that in their zeal to protect humanity, they often end up becoming the very thing they're fighting against.
It's one of the many paradoxes of the Imperium. They're fighting a war against an enemy that can corrupt even the most righteous souls. A war that requires them to make impossible choices and often sacrifice their own humanity in the process.
We've talked a lot about how humans deal with the warp.
Yeah.
But what about other species? How do they cope with this other dimension pressing against their reality?
Each species has its own unique relationship with the warp.
Yeah.
The Eldar, for example, are an ancient race.
Yeah.
With a deep understanding of psychic powers. But their history is, it's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked psychic indulgence.
You're referring to the fall, right?
Yeah.
The cataclysmic event that birthed Slaanesh.
Right.
The chaos god of pleasure and excess.
Exactly. The Eldar's pursuit of pleasure and their exploration of the warp's deepest secrets created a psychic shockwave that reverberated throughout the galaxy. It ripped a hole in reality, giving birth to Slaanesh and shattering their once mighty empire.
So they learned the hard way that the warp is not a toy to be played with.
They did. And now they live with the consequences. Their souls are vulnerable to Slaanesh's hunger, and they're forced to wander the galaxy as a shadow of their former selves.
It's a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations are not immune to the dangers of the warp.
It is, and it highlights the importance of finding a balance
between
harnessing the warp's power and respecting its inherent dangers.
Speaking of balance, the orcs seem to have a a very different relationship with the warp.
They do.
They're not exactly known for their restraint or their careful consideration of consequences.
The orcs are a fascinating case. Their psychic powers are driven by a collective belief system. It's a gestalt consciousness that allows them to, well, to manifest their desires into reality.
So if enough orcs believe something, it becomes true.
In a sense, yes. If enough orcs believe their guns are powerful, then they become more effective. If enough orcs believe they can win a battle, then their morale becomes unbreakable. It's a raw and untamed form of psychic power, fueled by their collective WAGH energy.
So their connection to the warp is more instinctive, less about control, and more about channeling their collective will.
Exactly. It's a primal form of psychic power that reflects their savage nature.
It seems like every species in the Warhammer 40k universe has to find its own way to survive the dangers of the warp. They do. Some through order and control,
right.
Others through careful understanding, and still others through sheer brute force.
It's a testament to the diversity of life in the galaxy and the myriad ways in which sentient beings interact with this other dimension.
This has been an incredible journey into the heart of the warp.
It has.
We've explored its nature, its dangers, and its impact on the galaxy.
Yeah.
We've seen how it shapes the destinies of entire civilizations and how it influences the lives of everyday people.
We've learned that the warp is not just a source of power, but also a reflection of our own inner selves, a mirror to our hopes, our fears, and our deepest desires.
And that it's a force to be reckoned with, a constant reminder that even in the grimmest of universes, there is always the potential for both great evil and great good.
There is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the warp. We hope you've learned something new and maybe gained a new appreciation for the sheer scale and complexity of the Warhammer 40k universe.
And remember, knowledge is power, even in the face of chaos.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and maybe keep a watchful eye on the sky.
Oh, yeah.
You never know when a warp rift might open up in your backyard.